This conference is being recorded.
Hi, this is Russ Tanner from Global Skywatch, and this is Monday Night Live. It is May 27th, 2013, and we have a special guest with us tonight, William Thomas, and after just a few announcements, we'll be speaking with him. I want to mention a few things before we get started, which are quite important. I first want to mention the purpose of this meeting so everybody understands what we're doing. Everyone is welcome to join us. This is a public meeting that you can learn about by going to globalskywatch.com/live. There we have the call-in number and the access code, or you can also join us by watching our live stream, which is actually on livestream.com. We have a link to it. If you go to globalskywatch.com, you can get a link directly to the live stream. Few announcements I want to make to get us started. I do want to first let everybody know that we do have this meeting every Monday night at 8:30 Eastern Time, 5:30 Pacific Time, 12:30 a.m. London Time, and if I remember right, it's 2:30 p.m. Hawaii Time. I could be wrong. Maybe it's 1:30. But you can join us anywhere on our live stream without having to call into the phone. The purpose for this meeting is to coordinate projects, to develop new projects, to continue our education about geoengineering, and just talk, support, and to network with each other so that we can be effective in stopping geoengineering from continuing. Again, the website that hosts this is globalskywatch.com. Go to globalskywatch.com/live. If you want to call in, you can call in 559-726-1300, and the access code is 156230. Once again, that's 559-726-1300, and the access code is 156230. I do want to mention that we have the geoengineering yard signs are now available. We have a new batch that came in. So if you want to participate in sending people to the geoengineering.com website, which is specifically designed to help introduce new people to the subject of chemtrails and geoengineering, please consider putting a yard sign in your front yard. You can get to that website by going to globalskywatch.com and scrolling down the home page until you see the End Geoengineering Project page. It's all right there. You can purchase your sign there. You can also purchase bumper stickers. We really encourage people to use bumper stickers if you can, because it's a very easy way to reach out of our normal circles and get in touch and spread the word to people that you don't personally know. If you have an idea for a project or an idea you want to share with us for getting the word out, you can always contact us at globalskywatch.com. I also want to mention that we have the global events calendar that lists many of the events. We're trying to have a centralized place where you can go to find out where all the events are taking place that have anything to do with chemtrails and geoengineering. And you can get to the global events calendar by going to globalskywatch.com and then clicking at the top of the page the global events calendar link. You can also check our news feed. We also have a news feed you can click at the top of our globalskywatch.com website. And our news feed has, we have two news feeds. We have one that is specifically for this subject, and then we have a general news feed that covers all kinds of other news as well. Both of those news feeds have RSS feeds. You can see the news feed also on our homepage, the Global Skywatch homepage, or you can click the news feed link and actually get in and read the stories and watch the videos that are posted there. I do want to mention that we do have a few new features on the Global Skywatch website. We're trying to bring people together with skills. If you have a skill that you want to share, please visit the Global Skywatch forum, and you will see a forum specifically for advertising your skill that you want to offer or volunteer to other people who are trying to accomplish some mission or some project related to exposing geoengineering or chemtrails. We also have another form right next to it for asking for a skill. So you can browse either one of those two folders and see if there's a skill that somebody needs that you might have, or if you need help with your project, if it's technical help, burning DVDs, help with a computer, whatever it is, you post your need in that forum, and let's bring people with skills and with needs together and get our projects accomplished. If you need signs printed, posters printed, things designed, whatever skill you have, if you proofread, if you type, whatever it is, please post it there so that we can get people together. I also am doing a series on called My Chemtrail Story, where we'll talk on the phone in an informal conversation for 5 to 15 minutes, and we'll record that conversation, and then we make that conversation available in a section of our website called My Chemtrail Story. And the purpose for that is to also open the eyes of the public to the fact that this is personally affecting people's lives. And when they hear your story, they will be able to relate to what's going on in your life, and many people will understand that even though they may not taste and smell chemtrails like some of us do, it actually is a reality that affects your health. I want to, before we get started, I want to thank Lexi. Lexi has been absolutely invaluable in putting so many things together, so many of these projects together, and tonight is a perfect example. Lexi was responsible for getting Will and I to make contact with each other so that we're able to set up this meeting and this interview tonight. So thanks go out to Lexi for your absolutely invaluable work and your labor that you put into this cause. It's very, very much appreciated. Final announcements. I do want to mention that I am co-hosting with Dane Wigington and Richard Sachs on Saturday afternoons. Dane Wigington is hosting a new online radio program called Geoengineering Watch Radio, and you can watch it by going to ucy.tv and look for the Geoengineering Watch show there. It happens every Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, and we're on for 2 hours. So we have a long time to chat and get into the details of this program. And I do encourage you to invite your friends, invite the public, because we do aim at introducing new people to the subject of chemtrails and geoengineering. I want to now introduce our special guest tonight. I'm really honored to have him on. When I first learned about chemtrails and geoengineering back in 2005, when the town I lived in began to get hit on a daily basis for the first time, and I started suffering from it from the very first day, I did a search on the internet, and his is, if not the first, one of the very first websites that I found. And I started reading his research, and it began to immediately open my eyes and make me realize that this is real. Of course, I knew it was real, but it made me realize what is going on is big, and it made me understand it from the very beginning, and the information was very important. William Thomas is an award-winning investigative reporter with over 40 years of publishing experience. He's a former pilot, bluewater sailor, and a member of an emergency response team that served 5 months in the Gulf during and immediately after Desert Storm. William Thomas's writing and photography have appeared in more than 50 publications in 8 countries, including translations into French, Dutch, and Japanese. He has won 4 feature writing awards as well as a Best Documentary Short at the 1991 U.S. Environmental Film Festival for his documentary Eco War. He is the author of the following articles and publications: All Fall Down, The Politics of Terror and Mass Persuasion, Scorched Earth, Bringing the War Home, ABCs of Cell Phones and Other Hazards of the Wireless Age, Days of Deception, Ground Zero and Beyond, Smart Meters for Smarties, Chemtrails Confirmed. And the real nice thing is he makes all or most of these available for free from his website, willthomasonline.net. Will, thank you so much for being with us today.
You're very welcome, Russ. Pleasure to be with you and our other listeners tonight.
Well, the first thing I've always wanted to ask you, it's really amazing to be on here talking with you, because back in 2005, like I said, your website was the first one that I experienced where I did major reading and learned about this issue. Let me just start with understanding, how did you actually get involved in this issue or the other ones that you're involved in?
Well, I've been an investigative journalist for many years, as you pointed out in the intro. I specialize in stories that the mainstream media refuses to report. I should say the corporate-controlled mainstream media. So in 1997, in the winter months, I was working for Environment News Service. That's a worldwide independent wire service dealing with environmental issues. And I was contacted by Jim Crabtree, managing editor there. He asked me to look at a video submitted by someone called William Wallace, who was living with his wife Ann on the east slopes of the mountains outside in Washington State. And Jim sent me the video, and put it in and looked at it, and I just started laughing. Frankly, I thought, here we go, 30 minutes or an hour of shaky video of contrails. But after 5, 10, 15 minutes, I stopped laughing because these things were not acting like normal condensation trails that are emitted from hot jet engine exhaust at high altitudes when the temperatures are very cold, about minus 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and humidity is very high, about 70% humidity. So these things were not dissipating like your breath exhaled on a cold day. In fact, they were spreading out as I watched the videotape until they covered the entire sky, and they lingered for, well into the day. I finally managed to contact William Wallace. I interviewed him. I published my first story for Environment News Service, speculating that this might be some kind of weather modification, but not really understanding what was happening. Within 3 months, I had nearly 1,000 emails, phone calls, interviews with people across the United States, and just starting out in Canada as well, all reporting the strange phenomena of these persistent plumes. Art Bell heard about this on Coast to Coast. Producer called me up. I was on that show in January of '98 and broke the story to some 5 million listeners. In the first, I think we did 8 shows together on chemtrails with Coast to Coast. And in February or late January of '98, I used the word chemtrails for the first time in a subsequent Environment News Service article, and that term has now become very popular. I'm just noticing that Google reports over 2.5 million different entries for chemtrails. So there we are. I had no idea at the time that this story would take off, and as we say in the journalism business, have such legs. I've never encountered a story that had such staying power as this issue of chemtrails, which we now understand to be geoengineering.
Why do you think this has such legs?
It's something that people can verify for themselves. It goes on overhead in many cities in the Northern Hemisphere almost on a daily basis. And it's a covert program that is in our face, if I can put those two thoughts together. And I think that is most unusual. You know, I did a story on bringing the war home. I wrote a book on the origins of Gulf War illness and the chemical biological warfare that took place before and during Desert Storm. And that story, as fully documented in my book, did not come out officially until 10 years later. So people were, I think, quick to pick up on this chemtrails notion, and it has gone viral for years now. And it's not going away because the lines in the sky aren't going away. I think it's that simple.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And so many people are sick, and more people seem to be making a connection. Now we're having protests all over the world about this. Australia is leading the way. They're having protests in probably over a dozen cities every month about this subject. So they are really hot on it. San Francisco, is one of the places leading the way in the United States, along with some other areas. Um, so, I mean, I just totally agree. This is not going away at all. I know that, one thing I like to do in this program is this really isn't really like a radio show necessarily. It's kind of like a conference. We have people who call into a phone console, and we also have people who listen to the call on a live streaming video. And the idea is to get information that's useful out to people. And it's my impression by looking at your website that that's something you really like to do. You are really concerned about getting information to people. Is that true?
That's absolutely true, especially, again, the information that is hidden, covered up, or denied by the mainstream corporate media. I feel very strongly as a reporter, as a professional journalist, that it's my duty to get verifiable, documented information out to people in a timely manner. I would make a quick note that, as you know, my work, including many of my books, can be downloaded for free at willthomasonline.net. I urge people to do that. Check out the information and the links. And if you can, please send a donation to keep this ball rolling, keep my website up, and keep the information coming. I also would like to add that I feel at the same time as a reporter that if I'm going to broadcast bad news or difficult information, even frightening information, it is my moral duty to, at the same time, give alternatives, solutions, something for people to use to deal with this information. It's not enough just to alarm people. In fact, it's often counterproductive if it shuts people down and they feel hopeless and helpless in the face of such a huge program as geoengineering. So it's very important to give solutions, and we have some very good ones tonight.
Well, good. I really want to get into that. One thing that's important to me is I'm an information person. I really want to get information to people that they can use. And of course, this show will be archived and listened to by thousands of people over periods of time. What is the most important stuff that you'd like to cover with chemtrails, and then we can move into other subjects that you mentioned you would like to cover as well. But I just want to give you the floor and say, what do you want to say to people about this?
I want to say spread the word. I'm guessing you have a fairly knowledgeable audience. There might be some new people to this information tonight. I think most people are pretty well up to speed. I would also suggest that people pay attention to any mainstream media notice of geoengineering, because this is bringing the whole issue of so-called chemtrails, now called solar radiation management, a terrible phrase, as if we can even manage ourselves, let alone the sky. But as geoengineering makes big headlines in Europe and garners huge controversy and protest there, I'm hoping to see the same thing in North America. Certainly not seeing much notification of geoengineering or discussion of that topic here in Canada. But I hope that as it starts to come out, people can use this mainstream coverage, if you will, to make a bridge between chemtrails, which has always been regarded as something fringe and suspect, and make a bridge to the very definite reality now being admitted and urged by some very prominent people called geoengineering. So I think this gives us a major opportunity here to bring this subject forward. And again, I would suggest using the words and the language and the terminology of the geoengineers themselves, the Ken Calderas, who has some very big reservations about this, by the way, other scientists, again, solar radiation management, geoengineering, using terms like this instead of the very loaded word chemtrails may get us further down the road here. And for me, it's been a very long road.
Yeah. Will, in speaking to Dane Wigington, who I co-host a show with him, and he has says many times, if you go on Google and you do a search for chemtrails, you get Wikipedia's definition of chemtrails as a conspiracy theory. You get other websites that kind of marginalize the importance of this subject. However, if you get on there and you search for solar radiation management or you search for geoengineering, you actually come across scientific information, and this is really beneficial in helping the public to understand that this is very real.
Yes, and maybe helping a few scientists understand that this isn't about to happen or could happen, is happening, has been going on for quite some time. And again, by using that kind of terminology, we might be able to get some atmospheric scientists finally on board with this issue enough to come out publicly, as some are doing, warning about the hazards should this take place. We need scientists to warn about the hazards of a program that has been taking place since at least 1998.
Yeah, I'm real familiar with the hazards myself. I had a heart attack in 2011, and I have no doubt in my mind that it was from the spraying. The pain in my heart was going on for a long time, and it was modulated by the intensity of the spray in the air. And finally, I wasn't able to protect myself during 2 days of intense spraying, and then I just broke down and ended up taking an ambulance ride for the first time in my life. Very, very critical subject. I think so many people are sick today and they don't know the cause because they don't taste or smell them. So they don't really know the cause of their illnesses, but probably this is causing so much illness. Now, you know, I know we haven't chatted at great length in the past, and I really want to give people as much information as possible that you're interested in sharing. Where would you like to go right now? What do you want to talk about in reference to this?
Well, let's get into health. You've mentioned it several times. I haven't picked up on it yet, so let's jump in there. And I would say to you directly that the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States of America is totally on board with your suspicion of your heart attack symptomology with fine particulate pollution. The EPA, and this is in my book, Chemtrails Confirmed, people can grab it online at willthomasonline.net. The EPA says that any particle 10 microns or smaller, that's much, much smaller than the diameter of a human hair. Anything 10 microns or less is an extreme human health hazard. That's the EPA's own words. And they say that this stuff, if you inhale it, migrates from the lungs into tissue, congregates around the heart, where it causes inflammation and can cause death. Their words now, within 24 hours among those who are most susceptible. They were looking at ground level air pollution from smokestacks and automobiles. But the particle size recommended, as you well know, in the use patents for the aerial spraying of these sunlight reflecting chemicals called for aluminum oxide and other reflectant chemicals 10 microns or less. So we have that 10 microns and we have a human health hazard, and we have emergency rooms filled with people suffering acute asthma and allergy attacks, gastrointestinal problems. Many of them have never been in an ER in their life and have had no allergies or other ill health effects before being exposed to this fallout. I would also note that Ken Caldera, who did the computer simulations for Dr. Edward Teller, the late Edward Teller, who called for an aerial sunscreen, again in 1998, when the warming atmosphere, and particularly the oceans, were really starting to cause havoc and some pretty big headlines. And at an international seminar on planetary emergencies, Teller suggested the spreading of sunlight-reflecting chemicals to slow or even stop this warming. And Caldera did his research, his computer simulations at Lawrence Livermore. He later said, hoping to prove Teller wrong. And to Caldera's dismay, it appeared that if they spread something like 5 million, 10 million tons of these very tiny particles in the atmosphere over time, they would reflect about 1% of incoming sunlight, enough to stop further warming despite an anticipated doubling of CO2. Caldera worried that this would, in his words, and he was addressing a major geophysical conference in San Francisco at the time. He said this would destroy the ozone layer because it would supercool the upper atmosphere, and the CFCs that destroy ozone would congregate in huge ice crystal clouds and chew away the ozone layer. So Caldera said, we can't do this. We better not do this because of the ozone layer. And then he said he had another major personal concern with this approach, and that was health. He said this kind of fallout is going to hurt a lot of people, especially the vulnerable. So we have this concern echoed by air traffic controllers across the United States. People who download my ebook, Chemtrails Confirmed 2010, can actually click on part of an audio interview with a senior air traffic control manager on the northeastern seaboard. Now, he did 3 radio interviews with radio reporter S.T. Brent. I collaborated on those with some questions. He was absolutely identified. He did this before witnesses. We did not use his name to protect him and his family. And after describing the program and what controllers were seeing on their radar scopes, which was U.S. military tankers.
Air traffic controllers, you mean?
Air traffic controllers on their scopes, yes. Looking at U.S. Air Force tankers in commanded airspace, in their own airspace, leaving something behind them that could be tracked on radar. And this caused such concern that the controllers were being ordered, and are still, as far as I know, being ordered, to vector in arriving commercial airliners below the military flights so the clutter from the spraying at higher altitudes would not obscure the scope and cause safety issues. Those controllers, at least one of them in the Midwest, was so concerned about health effects, that person went to a hospital emergency on a weekend after observing this kind of activity on the scopes, and found indeed that the emergency room was jammed with respiratory patients. So the controllers have been and continue to be concerned about the health effects. Caldera, who did the experiments, are concerned about it. And we have the CDC reporting abnormal, very high numbers of deaths. They called it an epidemic of fatality. Their words again, and we're back in the winter of 98, 99. Same thing was happening in England, where they had to use refrigerator trucks as portable morgues. So many people were dying. Now, I don't want to alarm people with this information because we have not, in years since, received these kind of dire reports. But it does go to show how dangerous these particulates can be.
Hey, Will, can I ask you a quick question here?
Go ahead.
What I experienced being someone who can smell, I'm among the small percentage of people who can smell and taste the spraying. What I noticed in the beginning when they started hitting us when I was in Jamestown, they started regular daily spraying in 2005, which is kind of late in the game, but it's a smaller town. I think maybe they saved it for later. It was if you were to graph the intensity in time, the intensity would go so high I could not physically breathe the air. I had to go into the shower, put a wet washcloth over my mouth. It was intense, and then it would completely clear, and then it would go really hard and go, and then clear. And what I've noticed in a few years after is they started leveling it out, so it didn't go up and down so high. They kind of leveled it out, and they kept it below the threshold of other people's senses of sense and smell, because when it got really intense, there were normal, non-sensitive people who could smell and taste it. So, what you're saying kind of makes sense that, we're not experiencing those big dramatic, where they have to get refrigerator trucks to handle the overflow. But yet, I mean, when I went to the ER in 2011 with my heart attack, I had to stay in the ER for much longer than I normally would have because the hospital was full. Not to mention the fact that on Tuesday night, the second night I was there, they sprayed so hard, I asked a friend of mine to bring in my wet mask. I had to wear it all night. and my nurse was gone for 8 hours because he could not get free because they were having so many respiratory problems and heart problems in the hospital. My IV alarm was going off all night. So um, experiencing the same kind of thing here. One thing I wanted, I'm just kind of supporting your story. They've really leveled it out. And when I flew back in 2010, we flew probably 1,000 or 2,000 feet below all the chemtrail jets that were up there. And I was specifically looking and had a window seat and took some video and pictures. The question, really quick question I want to get about Ken Caldera is that he seems to be kind of like a salesman right now for this, for for the program. Saying we're going to do this in the future, even though I guess you're saying he originally had a lot of concerns.
I think he just still has the concerns, but I think he's more frightened of a runaway greenhouse effect. We don't have to debate this right now on the phone, simply to say that it is absolute scientific fact that temperatures are going up, the Arctic is melting, and the methane is thawing, and the thawing methane in the far north is frightening a lot of scientists, and they don't frighten easily. And I think Caldera got pushed by this anxiety into finally boosting this program. Interestingly enough, I called him up some years back, and asked him about the program, and he said, yeah, he'd worked on it. He didn't think it should go ahead, but as far as he knew, it was not happening. They weren't doing the spraying. They just done the tests for it. That was very curious because out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, two scientists working on this project gave an interview to a friend of mine, Bob Fedrakis. He's an award-winning journalist for Columbus Alive magazine, and they verified that, yeah, they were working on this. There were two parts to it. One was to reflect sunlight and modify or slow the heating of the atmosphere. And the other, they said, was to conduct radio and radar waves over the horizon. They verified the program. Now, they were both on leave from Lawrence Livermore, the same lab that Caldera worked at, but he wasn't aware of their work. So I think this is highly segregated, highly compartmentalized, and he didn't know of their work. Interestingly, the scientists, one of them, also expressed health concerns, and this was something that I had been saying for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months before, speculatively. We know that in the upper atmosphere of this planet live huge colonies of bugs, if you like, of viruses, bacteria, and fungi. And this was found out in the 80s when weather balloons would come down covered with these critters that were being mutated by the strong ultraviolet altitude, but basically leaving us alone. And now we find are largely responsible for cloud and rain formation. One of the Lawrence Livermore scientists expressed the concern that spraying these chemicals could bring these nanobugs down to ground level and into the lungs of living creatures like us. And our immune systems would not be able to recognize these bugs and would not be able to fight them off. And I think that is a major part of the health concerns with so-called chemtrails.
That is extremely interesting because I get reports from many people, and that is one of the big reports that I get: mold and mildew and respiratory issues everywhere.
Yes, and Joseph Paleo out in Idaho, a naturopath, all in my book again, tested many people complaining of chemtrail-related illness, and the number one commonality among all of them was fungus in their blood.
Yeah.
Now, it can come from other sources, but fungus among us is a major, major health stressor. And I'm convinced that spraying anything at high altitudes, 35,000, 37,000 feet in the stratosphere, will definitely bring these bugs down to earth. Robert Falk, professor emeritus out in Texas, was just testing some of these bugs and found that they really like aluminum.
They like aluminum? What does that mean?
Aluminum, they would gravitate toward aluminum and look out below.
Really?
Yeah, that's all in my book, and so the health consequences, the unintended consequences of this spraying are severe. But since the program continues, and this has been well documented and well known among the perpetrators, we have to say at this point it's intended.
Yeah, yeah, I'll tell you.
You and myself, I've had, let me count the symptoms. Standing in a restaurant, outdoor restaurant in Vancouver years ago, tapped the guy in front of me on the shoulder and said, "Excuse me, don't be alarmed, I'm about to fall down. I'm going to faint." I was so dizzy, the whole restaurant was spinning around as the chemtrails were being sprayed overhead. I've had extreme rashes break out in Texas after leaving the airport there. I've had a severe muscle pain in my left elbow that went on for quite some time, and a twitching right eyelid that nearly drove me nuts went on for well over a month. So, yeah, this is real.
Yeah, for me, you mentioned earlier about how it congregates around the heart and causes inflammation. Also, Dr. Russell Blaylock has done a lot of has written a paper and given a lot of interviews about the inflammatory effects of nanoparticle aluminum, how dangerous it is. And I will just attest to it. I have heard from a number of people, and I didn't have to know that it's true, but I've heard from a lot of people, and I myself experience when they spray this stuff. And there are different kinds of things that have different health effects based on their odor and taste. And the symptoms are vary from one to the other, but they are on schedules. But that these things that they spray cause me and the other people who contacted me had to have extreme heart pain, which I believe is inflammation. It's like a cold headache in your heart. And a cold headache is, of course, when you have capillary constriction and you're not getting enough blood flow and you start experiencing that pain. It's the same thing that I'm having in my heart, and I had it for years, and then my heart attack was led into right from that. So I think that inflammation is blocking uh, uh, blood flow in my heart, and I've heard this from so many other people. Of course, joints are the first things to feel it too. You got a lot of capillaries there. Eyes or headaches, migraines seem to be very common with this as well. Um, so to support you in saying that, I definitely have had the heart problems and the inflammation, the joint pain, the muscle pain, the dizziness, nausea, stomach pain, and on and on and on.
I would gently suggest that we be careful with the word nano. Nano is extremely small. 10 microns called for in the use patent is not nano. It's very small, no question, but it's not nano. My concern is that the U.S. military, the Air Force in particular, has come out publicly and said we are playing around with nanobots and nanotechnology and atom-sized computers that we can spread in the air. They will flock like birds, congregate. They can read out a storm cell. They can interfere with that storm cell. It's all very exciting. And we don't need big tankers. We can use drones because 10 pounds of nano would be, plenty. So I'm concerned that the nano part of this program is just getting underway. And as it is, in fact, at ground level in consumer products. And we're not prepared for the health effects of nano-sized molecules, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
One of which, big problem, the scientists and doctors are warning, this goes right into the brain. You inhale it, and a nanoparticle goes to your olfactory center in the brain.
Yeah.
And then you could have some major problems. I don't see this as a major component of chemtrails or SRM at this moment, but the Air Force has started out down this path, and if they go where they want to go with it, this could be an extreme human health hazard.
Now, in my experimentation, I had desperately looked and spent a lot of money, which I didn't have, on air purifiers because I was suffering tremendously. It was making it impossible to work at times, impossible to sleep almost every night. And what I found is that HEPA filters don't work. When I've tested, and I have several that I've tested, they would remove smoke, they'll remove pollen, they'll remove the sensation of dust in your nose, anything. Everything else is removed, but the odor and the taste, this metallic and odor and taste that occurs after the spraying events, just doesn't get taken out. Do you know of a way that it can be removed?
No, I've always recommended HEPA. So if that doesn't work, I don't really have an answer for you.
Okay. Because I know what I've done, and I'm basing this on sense of taste and smell. And I've done a lot of testing. In fact, what I ended up doing is building my own water-based devices, basically a shower. It was a big box that sprayed a fine mist and then blew air through it. And that actually did help. Didn't do it 100%, but it did help because I noticed in the shower it was much better. But anyway, I want to get back on track. I know we got sidetracked a little bit. You were talking about, well, first you were talking about Caldera and Robert Falk. Um, don't want to interrupt you. Is there a place you'd like to go from here?
I'm just curious if I can ask you, and this question goes out to all of our listeners. Do you have wireless in your home? Do you have wireless routers, a cordless phone, smart meter, things like that? As most people do.
Yeah, most people do. I've been very careful to avoid this. I have an old router. In fact, it's hard to find wired routers.
Yes.
But I have one, and I have a spare for when it breaks, because I don't want to be without one. I don't have a wireless keyboard. Everything is wired. My Ethernet is wired. I keep everything wired. I don't like wireless stuff.
Yeah, me too. Well, that's a very perturbing answer because I cannot ascribe the synergy of wireless piggybacking on possible barium in the atmosphere and really messing up your body and your health. If you are wireless free, basically, and don't have a smart meter on your house, these are pretty serious symptoms, very serious symptoms from this spraying alone. Now, for people out there with wireless devices in their homes, I would urge extreme caution. In fact, I would urge that you go ahead and unplug them immediately and deactivate them, because the intersection of electromagnetic radiation and chemicals intended to conduct, propagate, amplify electromagnetic radiation in these same frequencies has got to be a very bad combination. Wireless alone is extremely dangerous. There's plenty of information, again, on my website, or Google Bioinitiative Report, one word, Bioinitiative Report, and that is a compilation of some 2,000 studies. You can read the summary and get a pretty good handle on the dangers of wireless radiation. And you know, Russ, I have to remark that as above, so below. We have this plague in the skies above us, and they're ramping up the geoengineering aspect of it, changing the chemistry, seriously messing with not just the weather, but the jet stream, using HARP, threatening the planet. I'm with Dane Wigington on that assessment, with geoengineering, giving big perturbations, big shoves to a very unstable, dynamical, nonlinear system called the atmosphere that is already going nuts from uneven heating and other effects from our industrial age. Something you don't want to mess around with by poking at it with geoengineering. And yet on the ground, we have this massive plague of wireless radiation that, without question, scientifically, demonstrably, is one, sterilizing the population, that is fact, and two, brain wiping the population by interfering with neurons in the brain, that is fact, causing allergies, asthma, ADHD to skyrocket, perhaps not causing these things, although there's plenty of evidence pointing to that, but certainly exacerbating these illnesses. We're seeing brain cancers at epidemic proportion. I could go on and on, as I do, and people can download those short ebooks and get the factual information, check out the links for themselves. But we have this double whammy, if you will, of the aerial chemical spraying overhead and the wireless below. And these are both extremely serious issues, and I believe they're linked.
Well,
I don't think these are separate issues.
Well, yeah, one thing that's interesting, but before I speak on, I do want to tell people that we're talking to William Thomas. He's an author and researcher. Many consider him the father of geoengineering research in terms of exposing this to the public. He was certainly the first person that I found by name that I remember when I was searching for this the very first day I was exposed to this subject. You can join us every Monday night at 8:30 Eastern Time and by dialing 559-726-1300. Access code is 156230. And you can get all that information from globalskywatch.com/live. And I want to mention that Will Thomas's website is willthomasonline.net. And you can download his publications. He offers them for free on his website. And I do urge you to donate. Will Thomas is a very important contributor of information and research to this subject. Please donate and keep him writing and keep him researching so that we can benefit from his information. I was going to mention to you, I was telling you how I was wireless free for almost the most part. I don't think there's any exceptions here. I do hear what I call the harp hum. It goes on and off from time, and it's loud. It is sometimes so loud, it sounds like it's in the middle of my head, a little off to the right. It is just annoying, and I hear this from many people.
That's interesting in that, a couple of months ago in the morning I got up and I too heard this hum, but it wasn't harp. It was a smart meter grid. And it went away, thank goodness. I don't know how you live with that. And to my amazement, when I went online, I found other people experiencing the same thing. So for the susceptible people, when you put this kind of energy into the atmosphere, and especially when you start reflecting it off of chemicals intended to do just that, you get many effects, and among them is the so-called Taos hum or the harp hum, and now we have the smart grid hum. And this isn't pleasant, and it's a very good sign, a signal, if you like, of what's happening in our bodies.
Yeah, we're living in a sea of electromagnetic.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of electromagnetic interference, electromagnetic RF waves, very dangerous. I so much appreciate your research and everything that you have written and done. This is why I keep telling people, go to willthomasonline.net, read his publications, and donate to him so he can keep the information coming, because he was one of the original people that I know of and that many people ever found on this subject. Where would you like to go from here? What do you want to share with people? And if you want to afterward, when you're ready, we can do question and answer if we have time.
Okay, I want to get right to a solution, the biggest one I've run across. I am so pleased. I am more than delighted to announce and urge everyone to do this and to spread the word, but to Google Skyder Alert, SKYDERALERT, Skyder Alert, one word, and download this app. Although we are no friends of wireless, we admit that many people are walking around with wireless devices with cameras. And if you're one of those persons, by downloading the Skyder Alert app, which has been called the most important app ever invented, possibly the most important app, that was ZDNet, been called a game changer by an international film festival head. This is a very important app. You download this thing, put it on your device, and when you're outside and you see unmistakable plumes in the sky, particularly this time of year when it's starting to be too warm for normal contrails, maybe not just one line, but a couple lines or a grid pattern or an X pattern, you take a picture and you hit send, and you're done. But what you've just done is just the beginning, because this app will send that photograph with a covering letter explaining what's going on and a petition saying this must stop to your political representatives in Congress. Wherever you happen to live, it will locate them by your location, your constituency, and it will end up on their desk. And this Skyder alert has gone viral in just 2 weeks. It is number 5 among all social networking apps on iTunes, number 3 on Google Chat. It's on the top 10 in Twitter, and it's been going for a couple of weeks. So this thing is huge. I'm also pleased to say that it has now has global applications, no longer limited to the United States. The global app for Skyder Alert is useful in Europe, Canada, Asia, anywhere on Earth. I think this is going to be truly a game changer because, interestingly, Russ, when I first got into this subject, was down in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we were talking to a legislator, and he told us, we politicians, we won't move, especially on something like this, unless we're pushed by the public, because then we're covered. If enough people complain, we get enough petitions, enough emails, enough Skyder alerts, then we have to act. We have to raise our voices and call for an investigation and some kind of remediation. Only if enough people push us. So I urge people, don't give up on the petitions, the emails, and in particular Skyder Alert. Turn your device on, take the picture, hit send, and then please turn it off, okay? Don't hurt yourself. But this is huge. I think this is really huge. The man behind this is George Barnes. I met him last August at the International Chemtrails Conference in Los Angeles, where I was speaking. I did an interview with him. He is a professional cameraman. He works for the Fortune 500 companies. He's very, very well connected, very well respected in the industry. He's a mainstream guy. And he was out filming some cloud formations in time lapse, for an artistic effect, and accidentally ran them backwards and saw them end up coming from behind jet aircraft, and realized this is strange, and has been pursuing this ever since. And I have to congratulate him for coming out, risking his reputation, not to mention his income as a professional cameraman, filmmaker, to do this important work. So watch his movie online and check out the app.
Absolutely. I've got a screenshot of that up on the live stream so people can see that. It will go into the video that we will have posted for the next, I don't know how many years until this stops. I hope it won't be that long.
I don't think it will be. I think that the geoengineering aspect of this and the publicizing and the debate and the controversy, I should say building controversy around geoengineering, is going to bring this out and at least make people conversant with the subject, so that this will no longer seem so fringe or so alien. In fact, it is a mainstream topic already. And I think we're going to get some serious traction on this, as they say in the business.
That's excellent. Are there other solutions you'd like to discuss, or would you like to open up the lines for people to ask questions?
I think we can open up the lines in a second. I would again really strongly urge people to reduce their wireless exposure as much as possible and just eliminate it in the home. There's no need to have this in the home, and particularly around bedrooms where people need their rest and are vulnerable. And if you want to debate this, well, that's fine. But when it comes to children and pregnant women, you can't indulge in debate or denial. Children must be kept away from this technology. Pregnant women must be kept away from this technology. I see the pictures online, Russ, of the happy expectant mother with the wireless laptop on her big belly and the cell phone or portable phone in her ear, and I just cringe because that child is almost guaranteed to grow up with behavioral and learning disability permanently for life because of this prenatal and early infant exposure. This is extremely serious. All the experts in the field, all the big names in the field are saying, please keep this away from children, not just the devices, but the cell phone towers, the smart meters, the smart meter grid. We really have to band together on a neighborhood-by-neighborhood basis and stop or get these smart meters removed. This is extremely serious exposure. It's 24/7. It doesn't go away. And, of course, the industry will tell you, well, it's just like a cell phone. Yeah, except it's on all the time and it's full-body exposure, and cell phones are dangerous. So that's not a recommendation. So let's start paying attention to our wireless environment. Get these things out of schools. France is removing wireless from all elementary schools
Really?
and school grounds.
Really?
Europe is going nuts over this. Why? Because they're 10 years ahead of us.
Yeah.
Sweden introduced this technology, and they are the canary in the wireless mine. They have over 250,000 people out on paid permanent disability because of electromagnetic sickness, microwave sickness. Sweden is in huge trouble over this. Europe, the rest of Europe is not far behind. The Bioinitiative report came out of Europe. The Freiberg appeal came out of Germany. 3,000 doctors and health professionals signed it, called on the government of Germany to ban portable phones outright. Why? Because the cradles are cell phone towers. They are stronger than a cell phone tower 100 feet away, and they're in your house, in your bedroom, in the living room. Maybe there's 3 or 4 of them. The doctors in Germany said you must ban these portable phones and limit the use of cellular phones and other wireless devices. The signatories are now over 6,000 and climbing. So Europe is in an uproar. The EU commissioner has called on restrictions on wireless use across Europe. I find that interesting because they're still going ahead with smart meters. So that contradiction has to result in some kind of collision, I think, between the two forces of restriction and propagation. But here in North America, we have we're looking at a $4 trillion global wireless industry, and the corporations have a lock on our media, and we're just not getting straight information on these hazards. But people can go to my website, they can check out ABC's cell phones, they can check out Smart Meters for Smarties. These are easy to read, bullet format, lots of links, and inform yourself, and then start cleaning up your home space and perhaps your work environment. Very important.
Well, let me encourage people to start jumping in the queue. Let me turn on the Q&A mode.
Q&A session started.
And there it is. If you would like to call in, or you're already on the console, please press *6 on your phone, and you will be added to the Q&A queue. And while we're waiting for someone to ask questions, oh, we got people already. William, people want to talk to you, Will. Please consider going to Will's website, williamthomasonline.net, and he's got a lot of publications there. Please download those, read them, and donate so that he is able to continue his research and his publications. Is there anything you'd like to say before we take questions, Wayne? Oh, sorry, my bad. I shut you off here when I... oh, my apologies. When I go into Q&A mode, it mutes everybody except me. So anything you'd like to say to people before we take some questions?
No, let's get right into it.
Okay, you got it. Let's take our first Caller. Good evening, caller. Are you there?
Yes.
Hey.
Michelle in Kansas. Hi.
Hi, Michelle.
I would like to ask, you mentioned that you started, you did a radio program in January of 1998, and I just would like to know your opinion on why it's taking so long for this to become widespread knowledge and closer to being stopped.
That's a good question, Michelle. I've started a book, and I hope to get time to finish it someday, called Zombie Nation. And it was triggered by my early reporting on this phenomena, in which I would go up to people, relaxed, sitting outside. Hey, look at that. Have you ever seen anything like that? Michelle, they wouldn't even look up. They wouldn't even raise their heads. They didn't want to know. So we are in a culture of extreme denial and distraction. People are allergic to bad news or serious information, it seems to me. And at the same time, we have a sea of microwaves impinging on people's brains, literally, physically, destroying their ability to remember, to think straight, to put two sentences together, to evaluate critically what's going on. And we're rapidly heading toward a nation of zombies. You probably see them every day yourself, walking down the street, people looking at screens, oblivious to their surroundings. But it's not just the screen culture and the microwaves, it's the aspartame, the fluoride. You probably know the list as well as I do. All of these things affecting physically our ability to think, concentrate, and evaluate. So you match that with denial, a huge sophisticated brainwashing through television and the media, and the reluctance of people to accept something this big and this grave. And I think that could explain it. Again, as I mentioned, Gulf War illness went basically unreported, the truth behind it anyway, for 10 years. So there we are.
Yeah, Michelle, you've been doing a lot to raise awareness about this in your area, haven't you? Michelle, you still there?
Oh, yes. I've been doing what I can, kind of one person at a time.
What is your... Sorry. I'm interested in Michelle's take on what you feel is the reason that this hasn't gained more public acceptance.
Well, I don't know. And, people like Dane has said he feels like it's finally gaining some momentum. And to hear you talk about that app that has gone viral in 2 weeks, that's encouraging.
Yes, it's very encouraging. Yeah. Well, all I can say is stay tuned. Stay tuned. I think we're finally getting underway, but I share your frustration.
Well, I just hope it's not too late. I see posts on Facebook that say we're already dead and we don't even know it, and things like that. So it's kind of discouraging. But
no, you can't go there. You can't go there. Yes, we've crossed some very important thresholds. There's no doubt. But here we are. We're alive. We're functioning. We're talking to each other and to other people. And you never give up. You simply never give up, because you never know what's going to happen. And just as bad things happen, good things come out of nowhere and happen and can change the whole game. Maybe this app will do it.
Well, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for what you're doing. I know that you're busy in your area doing things, and I do want to encourage people to wake people up. Don't be afraid to let them know there's a sense of urgency, but be strategic when you talk to people. Like we often say, it doesn't do any good for people to run around screaming the sky is falling. You have to meet people where they are and open their eyes at a rate and in a way that they can relate to and that they can handle. But thank you so much for what you're doing, Michelle. Let's take our next call. Let's see if we can. Let me see if I get our next caller on here. Hi, caller, you're on.
Hi, William. Hey, you started out around 99 saying that ethylene dibromide was the problem. Can I confirm that somehow, or is that not true?
It's not true, and I did make an assertion way back in the early days because it's an extreme carcinogen banned by the EPA. And what happened was we actually got some jet fuel and ran tests on it and found minute, almost absolutely negligible quantities of EDB. So ethylene dibromide is not, repeat, not a factor in this spraying or in the illnesses resulting from it.
Well, why did you say that?
Well, because I had information at the time pointing to ethylene dibromide. I checked it out, saw in fact that it was extremely hazardous, and so published that information. But we were able to do a test.
Well, good. So we got that sorted out.
Corrected that information right away.
Yeah, one thing that I often run into in this this venue is that being able to smell and taste chemtrails. I know that there are different types. They're on different schedules. It's 9:41 here on the East Coast, and I know that in the next hour or 2 hours they're going to start spraying the type that I call the metallic chemical, and this is the one that causes the worst heart pain and inflammation and muscle pain. This is the one that put me in the hospital. This is the one I've heard other people talk about who have extreme heart and inflammation issues with. So it's not just like saying there's one substance they're spraying. I believe there's much more to it because there's at least 7 different individual scents and tastes that I have since 2005 identified and seen sprayed on a regular basis on a schedule. And there's a couple that have begun in the last couple years that I haven't even put into my article about chemtrail types because I wanted to really confirm that it really was something that was on a schedule and that was being used, that a lot of people smell. Smells like burning tires. That's one that's not in my article yet. It's kind of a burnt, sulfury, rubbery smell, and also it has its own set of symptoms as well. So it's a complicated subject. All right, we have our next caller. Are you there?
Yes, hi, Russ.
Hey, how you doing, Mark?
Good. Hi, well, my name is Mark. I live in southern Utah, and I just want to comment on your notion about the awareness to the problem is growing. Some time ago, well, first of all, Will, are you aware of the notion of Google Alerts?
Yeah, but why don't you explain that?
Oh, maybe a year ago, a friend of mine said, you can put the name Kanab. I live in Kanab, Utah, and it's a Google alert. And he said, anytime, anywhere in the world where the name Kanab comes up, you'll be notified. Well, I thought, okay. So I tried it, and then I went, wait a minute, I can put chemtrails in. So I've been watching Google hits every day of my life for almost the last year as regards to chemtrails. And not only is the list growing daily, but here's the kicker. Most of the hits that I've gotten up until recently were on alternate media sites for the most part, and then the usual debunker sites. But I got so excited that I actually called Russ Boyce to tell him that I'm getting hit after hit on mainstream media outlets like newspapers, newsletters for towns, weather channels on CBS. And I'm just glad to see it starting to spread into the mainstream a bit, because it's been squelched by them, but it's like, grabbing a handful of goo, it's leaking out through their fingers now, and the word's getting out.
That's really exciting, Mark. That's really exciting. Google Alert, you're saying that the mainstream press is using the word chemtrails and actually starting to treat this seriously. Now, to be fair, I've had a long interview done with History Channel, and the History Channel ran that worldwide, very popular show. I also did another one for the Discovery Channel, and NBC in Memphis, Tennessee was early to treat this seriously. A couple other television affiliates as well. But by and large, we were mocked by USA Today, another magazine down in New Mexico, and others. So I'm going to check this out, Google Alert for chemtrails.
Yes, and again, you can kind of keep your finger, as it were, on the pulse of the world, and you become aware of sites and different localities where people are discussing radiation chemtrails that you probably didn't know about.
Yeah, that's excellent. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're quite welcome. So anyway, Russ and Will, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's wonderful to have you on tonight. Really wonderful.
Thank you for your information.
You're quite welcome. Okay, Russ, that's good for me. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark, and thank you for what you do. You've called the local Air Force Base. You've written letters to the editor. You are going to lecture soon. Do you want to mention the date and time of your lecture, or is that not concrete yet?
It's a local. It'll be a local talk. They're having an author come in to discuss some book. It's a Tea Party conservative type group, and which I haven't really gotten involved with locally. But my name's getting out in this town a little bit with regards to chemtrails and what's going on because we get hammered here. So if this does materialize, and they do in fact want me to give a talk, I'll keep you guys appraised on that because I'm thinking I better learn how to do a PowerPoint presentation. I'm fairly adept with computers, but I've never done a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm sure is not all that difficult. And like I talked to you about the pamphlets, so I'm looking forward to it. There's so much in my head about these chemtrails. That's another quick side note, Will, is I do a tremendous amount of outdoor hiking in the backcountry of Utah and around the Grand Canyon. And so I really got to see over the last couple of years the behavior of jets. And I can tell you exactly what's going on. I mean, I did a hike a week ago, puffy white clouds in the sky, which is rare anymore, jets everywhere with nothing coming out of them all day. The next day, I call it the military assault. They all come in a fan from the same location, which seems to be Nellis or Edwards Air Force Base. They fan out right towards us. And on one of my recent hikes, I even took potassium with because Russ had a problem with potassium leading to a heart attack. And a couple of years ago, before I knew about chemtrails, I cramped up on a hike so bad I almost didn't make it home, and I never cramp up. Well, I just did a recent hike where I had this fan hit me about 2 weeks ago, this huge military assault right over my head. And I even had potassium supplements with me, and by the time I got back to my car, it's like a 16-mile hike, I started to cramp again. And it's got to be from the air. My eyes were burning, and I was coughing. And as much hiking as I do, I'm in fairly good shape, and that's not usually a problem. So I try to stay outdoors now, from that kind of 8-9 hour exposure, breathing heavy. But there's no doubt what's going on. I mean, I'm a sky watcher. I'm not bragging, but I mean, I'm outdoors a lot, and I see these dang jets, and it's so obvious.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. People that don't want to know about it just don't want to know about it.
Yeah, we have the same thing going on here, Mark, where they come over the Bay of Fundy from Canada, over the Bay of Fundy, and they fan out. Some of them go along a straight flight path. Most of them follow a very straight flight path, and then on some days they just fan out like a giant fan. So I've seen that same kind of thing here. Yeah. Well, yeah, go ahead.
That's what struck me when I first got into this, started contacting people. I mean, they were pulling their cars off the highway, jumping out, grabbing their families, or going into the house, pulling everybody outdoors, aiming camcorders at the sky. And I thought, come on. I mean, everybody knows what contrails are. We've lived near airports. We've seen these for all of our lives. Why all of a sudden are so many people pointing cameras at the sky and saying this is unusual, this is weird? And that was really a tip-off.
The funny thing with me, I'll mention this about contrails, is I've actually never seen a contrail. Having traveled the United States, I've always been a sky watcher. When I was a kid, I used to love rockets and jets, and I used to collect pictures of military and civilian jets. I used to know all the U.S. rockets, the Atlas boosters, and the Gina, and the Mercury, and the Saturns, and I used to just read that stuff passionately. So I always watched the sky, flew every year up the eastern seaboard to visit relatives for 3 weeks every summer. Lived in Tampa Bay, which was one of the busiest, lived in different places, but Tampa Bay was one of them. Lived on military base. I've actually never seen a trail come out of a jet engine until 2003 was the first time that I saw persistent trails come out, and I got sick that night. I got very, very sick with flu-like symptoms, and I had no idea what was going on. I knew something. I thought maybe an air show had gone on over Yosemite because I was in Yosemite on my way home from a convention in California. And I've never seen a trail come out of a jet, having traveled everywhere. It's very strange. I don't look at it as strange. It's just the thing for me is I've never smelled these smells and tastes. You know, when the trails started in 2005, when they started gridding the sky that day, you know, that day is when the horrible metallic smell and all the symptoms and the burning sinuses and headache just overwhelmed me. But
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
the photographs of condensation trails, these very short pencil-like trails in the same sky at the same time of a big fat white plume that's spreading out and has these feathery edges. You get both of those in the same photograph, and it's quite dramatic. Quite dramatic.
Yeah, yeah, and it's pretty wild too. As I also people know, I actually saw both in Jamestown when I lived in Jamestown, New York. After 2 years of intense spraying, I eventually had to move. That's why I moved here. I still own my house there. Um, they actually changed from all long persistent trails to short non-persistent trails after a 4-day break. But the flight scheduling was identical after the trails changed, and the tastes and smells were identical. And the same thing happened in Bangor. And I know our regular listeners hear me say this all the time, but for the new people, this is really important. Is I moved to Bangor to get rid, specifically because my health was in such jeopardy. I had to get out of Jamestown because of the intense spraying. Moved to Bangor, which I had taken 2 short trips to and didn't see any chemtrails except one 40 minutes, tiny one 40 minutes away, and the air was wonderful. Moved here in 2008. They started absolutely terrorizing us in 2008. In 2010, the same thing happened as in Jamestown, except there wasn't a 4-day break. Overnight, we went from a daily assaults that was so bad that the Bangor Globe actually did a story saying that we had the dimmest summer in history, and I have a copy of that article. And overnight, they all went to non-persistent trails, so that we only have persistent trails, and this continues to this day, only about 4 to 6 days a month. The rest of the time, they're flying at higher altitudes and leaving the non-persistent trails, but still the same smells and tastes. So I think they're trying to hide it.
Well, that's very worrying. If they're non-persistent trails, as you're describing, they can't be blocking much sunlight. I can't see it because the sunlight would hit a reflected trail and light it up. So if they're short duration, I'm not sure of the purpose, but it makes me nervous, even more nervous.
Well, that makes me. I've kind of felt that there were probably multiple purposes to this, and they're probably not. They're probably secret for a reason.
We do know that in times past, and as far as I know, it's ongoing, that possibly, according to one of my sources, 1 in 100 missions has a biostimulant, a bioagent mixed in with the chemicals to cause people to be ill enough to seek medical attention so that they could be tracked statistically. And this is to track the dispersal patterns of bioagents released at high altitude. Now, biological weapons are, by definition, always released at ground level because once they disperse, they become less effective. And if it starts to rain or the sun gets at them, they become very much less effective. In fact, the bio warfare scare is mostly overrated. And I've done a lot of research. I've written a book on the subject, Bringing the War Home. But the idea of spreading out the chemicals at altitude that would sicken a population or manipulate them chemically has been unheard of until recent years, when in fact this has been tried with the chemtrail spraying. And that could be a factor also in some of the illnesses people are experiencing. Again, this is not any kind of a cull or deliberate program like that. It's an experiment that is piggybacking on over 20 years of open-air experimentation on the American, the Canadian, the British public. Very well documented. Congress did an investigation into it, published the results, and shut the program down as far as they knew.
Well, one interesting thing, William, that I've experienced is, and what I'm about to say sounds a little strange to some people, but it's only because I have a very, very sensitive sense of smell and taste. is that ever since all my life, really, whenever somebody was going to be sick with a cold or flu, shortly before, 24 hours before, maybe 2 days before, they had what I termed virus breath. There was actually, if I smelled their breath, if I was in a car with them or in a small room, it actually caused a very specific sensation in my nose that was unlike anything else I've ever had, and it has a very specific, it's a mild, but not always mild, but it's a very specific scent that nothing else relates to. And I know this sounds a little strange, but then I got to the point where I could tell people when they when they were going to get sick, because 1 to 2 days after they started having quote unquote virus breath, they would get a cold or a flu. And I've done this all my life. I know it sounds a little strange, and I bet there's other people out there who've experienced this as well. In 2010, that was the year that the chemtrails went to short, non-persistent plumes, except for 4 to 6 days a month here in Bangor. And I also experienced for the first time a chemtrail type that I call the metallic chemical type. This type has the exact same sensation in my nose and the exact same scent as people with quote unquote virus breath. And when they spray this, the next morning I will wake up with a mild sore throat. If they spray it, and I have to take immune stimulants. If they spray it for 3 days in a row, most people around me begin getting sick. If they spray it for 5 days in a row, everybody's sick with cold and flu. Pediatricians' offices are backed up. In fact, I think they had to shut down the school here one day in the past year because so many people were sick, and it was after 5 or 6 days of the spraying of this type. And I just feel very obligated. It sounds a little strange for me to say this because it's not common, but there are people out there, I believe, who experience this as well. But I have to say this because this is something that I'm observing, even though it's a sense of smell. I have observed this, and the pattern is always with the metallic chemical type. It's not to say that the other types that contain barium and aluminum don't suppress your immune system, because of course we both know that, we all know that barium and aluminum are immune suppressants as well. But this actually seems like something biological. It has all the hallmarks and the exact same physical effects on me as experiencing a virus breath situation. Little strange, but I wanted to share that.
And of course, when we say flu, we're talking about an illness without a fever. Unlike a quote normal flu, so-called flu or flu-like symptoms from this fallout, at least in my experience reporting on this is not accompanied by a fever. And that's why so many doctors and hospitals reported in the early days, this isn't the flu. We don't know what this is.
Right. I up from 2005 onward, that's exactly what we experience, is all the symptoms of a flu without a fever. The exception began in 2010. In 2010, when they started the metallic chemical type, which is the virus breath type of chemtrail that has that signature, which will cause me to wake up with a sore throat in the morning. In fact, this morning, they sprayed it last night, and I woke up at 8:30 this morning with a sore throat because they were spraying it through for at least a few hours when I was trying to sleep. And they've been doing it all day today, and my throat is kind of painful right now, but I've been taking immune stimulants, and that's how I hold it off. But in 2010, when they started this, was the first time that I experienced this illness from chemtrails that does also have a fever in many people. Now, before this, there was no fever. It's exactly what you were saying. But now with this particular type, people get sick with a very conventional type of flu, except that it lasts for 3 weeks or 6 weeks. They just can't shake all the symptoms. They get very sick at first, and then when they get, after a few days or a week, they can work again, but they just can't get rid of the symptoms for weeks. But I just want to share that. I really don't care if I look a little strange. I am telling the absolute truth, and since I have this really sensitive nose, I guess I must have it for a reason, I suppose. But let's move on to our next caller. Caller, you there?
Yep. Yeah, how you doing, Russ?
Hey, good. How are you, Dan?
Good. Dan in Rochester. Hi, Will.
Hi, Dan.
Hey, pleasure to be able to talk with you guys. Had a few quick questions, as usual. I want to make a point, Will. about what you had said about the intentionality of the particles being sprayed to have the bacteria, whatever, come down where people get sick, and then they track them. That actually connected, I think, a few dots for me. I appreciate your bringing that kind of thing up. I do a fair amount of reading about that kind of aspect. I'm very involved with like telecom and database administration, that kind of thing. So I'm, very familiar with what the government is doing as far as tracking a lot of things that we do. And it's not just the government. You look at advertising, marketing, that kind of thing. Where they have the cameras now all over the place, and they have the facial recognition software where they can customize advertisements, on billboards as you're walking down the street based on the fact that they know where you are at any given time. So anyway, that's just a phenomenal thing. I don't know that I had heard that before. I've been studying chemtrails for a good number of years, so I think that's really awesome you had brought that up. It's quite a bit of food for thought for me. Anyway, hopefully it is for other people as well. And just before I ask a question here, hey, Russ and anybody else on here, did you guys know that Old Forks, New York got 3 feet of snow last night?
Yeah, I saw that.
The temperature on the ground.
I don't know. My wife just told me, actually, that they had gotten that much snow. And interestingly enough, I had gone to North Carolina for a few days, and it got quite cold down there. And I go to the NOAA website, and I track an awful lot of the funk top view of what NOAA offers. And you can see temperatures with this funk top view of temperature in the upper atmosphere. And I've seen it, and I've heard people talk about this stuff on YouTube videos. One guy named Bruce Douglas, for example, pretty prominent in this stuff. And he mentions that when you see certain colors, you can tell that it's an actual temperature in the upper atmosphere. If it's red, then there's tremendous dumping of chemicals in the atmosphere at that point. So anyway, I've been watching a pattern that keeps repeating itself weather-wise. And it's interesting, of course, the military is saying that they're going to own the weather by 2025. I think it's probably going to be 2015. The way this stuff works.
I think it was 1970. Go ahead.
Right. So anyway, what they do is they bring they bombard areas down there in Louisiana, and what happens is they spray as well, and these chemicals go up the East Coast, and then they're able to start a counterclockwise swirl up above Maine, up in Canada, an area like that. And as the winds swirl around, they're able to bring down really cold weather when they want to set this pattern up into the Midwest, like the Dakotas, etc. And I've actually watched them do this quite a few times, and it's a repeating pattern. I've been around a long time, in my 50s now, and I've never seen weather patterns just repeat themselves. So anyway, it didn't surprise me at all. We were supposed to get a freeze last night. We didn't. I don't think it got quite that cold, but I do know that Old Forge did have that much snow. So you asked if I knew what the temperature was on the ground. Are you looking for a higher temperature than what you might think, or are you looking for something lower?
In fact, I am looking for a higher temperature. I'm finding, again, using Dave Wiggins' excellent work, huge snow dumps on the East Coast as well as the West Coast of the United States with temperatures of 37 degrees Fahrenheit into the 40s. It seems to me, and I've done the research, you can read my article at Geoengineering Watch on the snowmen turning warmth into winter, and using snow nucleating chemicals, special chemicals, the weather modifiers can make it snow at temperatures well above freezing. So to me, that's always a telltale sign. If you've got warm temperatures on the ground and a snow that comes down like wet cement, really not fully formed, but a very heavy snow that breaks tree limbs, and it's very, very hard to shovel.
Well, as a matter of fact, we got about a foot of that type of snow last year, very late in the spring, just before summer, and it did take down actually a lot of my trees on my property. I live in the woods. We had all kinds of apple trees collapse, and it actually killed all the buds on the apple trees that we have. We didn't have one single apple last year. Wow. And I believe in a majority of the nefarious side of this stuff. You know, I find I'm hard pressed to believe really there's much, if any at all, you know, altruistic types of reasoning behind these people doing this type of stuff, like the concept of trying to block the sun and that type of thing. I have a hard time believing that, because there's quite a bit of research I've read where they say that if you have clouds at lower atmospheres, that will tend to, if I remember correctly, that will help cool the planet. But if you have clouds in the upper atmosphere, that will heat the surrounding area around the Earth. So it just seems like we have high clouds an awful lot when they spray. You see some lower, of course, but it seems to me that quite a bit of it is upper, and it always seems to be warmer outside than the weather people tell you it's going to be when they're spraying. I think there's an awful lot of heat being trapped into our atmosphere, and it's actually causing the warming.
Hey, Dan?
Makes sense.
Yeah, Dan, let's see if William, do you have any response to what Dan's saying, or any thoughts?
Just to note, as I do in my book, that it's a real point of contention among atmospheric scientists whether clouds shade and cool the Earth or trap heat like a blanket. And I'll go along with Dan and say, yeah, it can be your way depending on the altitude of the cloud cover. And I would say that altruism is not a part of this. Again, with the methane releases, the melting Arctic, something has to be done. Scientists are very upset about this, but this is all about petroleum pollution and profits as usual. On one hand, it's about military weaponization of the atmosphere on the other hand, and there's no altruism in sight, I promise, though this might be spun to the public, geoengineering that is, as you know, we have to do something so that we can keep driving our cars and, you know, keep doing what we're doing, and don't worry, this quick fix will take care of everything, so go back to sleep. But there's no altruism. I totally agree with that, and it's very dangerous in many, many respects.
Yeah.
Upsetting the atmosphere and diverting monsoons, drying up the rain, to the conduction and amplification of electromagnetic.
Well, one interesting aspect of this too, and this touches on what Dan was saying, is that Alex Jones actually did an interview of a guy who was called the father of weather warfare, who in 1964, if I remember the date, but it was in the mid-60s, were steering hurricanes, diminishing hurricanes, building up hurricanes, cloud seeding so efficiently that they could wash out bridges in Vietnam. You know, they had this stuff at least beyond its infancy a little bit in the 60s. So if that's the case, why, we'd have to ask ourselves, why are they allowing such terrifying weather? Or, you know, of course, I believe that they're certainly causing the majority of this, but why is this, why are we having all this terrible weather and hurricanes when they can steer them, diminish them, and control this to such an amazing degree? And I think that's because there are no altruistic motives here. This is exactly what you said, Will. Dan, I'll tell you, we're a little pressed for time. Did you have a question for Will?
Yeah, yes, I did actually. It's real quick here. I've been doing some thinking for a while here. I tend to come up with theories, whatever, and, you know, apply a scientific method, whatever, to test my theories and things. And I tend to be right an awful lot of the time. And one of the things that I'm finding when I talk with people is that when people at times will fear that the stuff's going on, we're breathing this, they'll go to their doctor and ask to have blood work done. And it turns out that I don't know that I've ever known anybody who could get an insurance company to pay for blood work for metals and salts and these things. It seems like pretty much they always deny it. And my thought on this, Will, is it's interesting because if this were to get out that we are being sprayed and we are all metallized and have salts and all these things, it seems to me that the insurance companies would be on the hook to do all the blood work and pay for all the blood work for everybody. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you ever come across anybody who talks about insurance companies involved with any of this stuff? And that's my question. I appreciate your letting me ask the question, Russ.
Thanks, Dan.
Let me come out of left field and say, gosh, if insurance companies are being concerned about wireless exposure, and they are, especially in Europe, especially in Great Britain, what would happen if you went to those insurance companies and said, well, I see that you're concerned about this. What would happen if a person swallowed barium, a known electrolyte, or aluminum, and then was exposed to this wireless? Do you think your claims would go up? Do you think this would be even a more serious situation? So the insurance industry may in fact be brought into it in that roundabout way, though I think it's extremely pertinent. As far as the blood test, though, I would suggest to our listeners to get a hair sample test. They're very inexpensive. They're very accurate in terms of the fallout and the kind of things that we're seeing. The only problem with blood tests or hair sample tests is we need a baseline. We need to know what is, quote, normal or average to make sense of the readings, unless, of course, they're off the scale. They're just spiking so high that it's obvious that there's something unusual, something wrong. But I think that for people who want to be tested, I think the hair test is the way to go because they would not need to involve their insurance company. And one other quick note on the spraying things to make people ill, report to doctors and track them. At least in the early days, I'm not up to speed in recent times. Often the heavy spray days, the weekends, were followed by television announcements. Call this 1-800 number and get a free and be part of this free survey. And it would be a medical survey talking about allergies or asthma or things like that. So I would say, watch out for these bulletins and these ads on television after heavy spraying, advising people to phone a number and be part of a project or a survey or get this latest pharmaceutical.
Yeah, interesting. I had a friend driving through Portland a couple years ago, and he heard them on the radio virtually every commercial break saying, "Do you have a headache? Call this number right now. We want to know. Do you have a migraine or do you have a sore throat? Call this number and tell us." And there's like no company associated with it. They were just like, "What is this?" Not sure what to make of it, but it was interesting. Okay, we've got a couple more callers. I don't want to keep you too long, Will. I know you've got your hands full with your life and projects. We've got a couple more calls. Caller, you there?
Yeah.
Yeah. How you doing?
This is Helen calling from Georgia, and I unfortunately came in late to the call, but so I missed the first part about what you were talking about, but I will go back and listen in the archives. I got you talking about the wireless stuff and the energy sort of thing, which I'm kind of out here in left field, but that made me think about something called the Keshe, Keshe Foundation, and that is an Iranian-born physicist who was educated in London, and he has supposedly come out with some type of a gravity-based energy that he claims he's giving to governments and to the world. He's not, patenting it from what I know about it, and he's just asking governments to sign a peace agreement that they will not go to war. And so I was just kind of thinking and just sort of drawing the conclusion that, the people that seem to be doing all this are the big oil and the big money and the big bankers. And so if I don't know what you know about this, but if it is true, then they are obviously not going to want this information to get out. They claim that this energy, I think it's something similar to a Tesla technology, but I'm not a physicist. I have seen him give a talk or so, a brief talk about it online. And then what is his name? Andrew Weber,
Yes.
I think his name,
Yes.
from Canada. He has an interview with this Mr. Maran Keshe online, and it's a long one. I watched part of it. So anyway, I just thought if you can find out if this is in fact true, then we should be trying also to get the word out about this free energy, because they claim that this will make everything obsolete. We won't have to burn gasoline. It will help poor developing nations. They'll be able to pump water, and people will be able to have electricity. It'll enable us to completely get off the grid and have the kind of free and healthy society that we all want to get away from what's going on now. So I guess all the wireless stuff kind of made me think about that when you were talking about the smart meters and all that kind of stuff. If we could just completely eliminate wireless, maybe this is another way that we could do communications that would not be harmful. So do you know anything about this, Mr. Thomas?
I have looked into the Keshe Foundation and have checked that out. I haven't found anything that convinced me there was anything of merit to this claim, as is so often the case with free energy, so-called free energy. Many experiments, but being the doubting Thomas and a reporter, I'm always saying, well, show me. And I haven't seen anything in the free energy camp beyond small working models. Encouraging, no question, but I haven't seen anything that would actually produce enough energy to do useful work. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, and I am saying that anything that does work is immediately either bought up or suppressed by the energy companies. Now, let's be very clear on this. These smart meters are part of a smart grid, and the problem with this is the grid. This goes back to the 1930s and 40s, but Minister Fuller, very famous guy, said, why don't we have a universal currency, the same all over the world, and that currency will be energy. And we're going to network all this energy and call that currency, and we, the technocrats who know better than everyone else, will control it. So it's not just electricity, but coal, oil, nuclear. If it's energy, the controllers, the elite, want to control it, and through that means control us. And anything that moves us away from that grid that you're talking about, I've lived with solar energy on the water for many years, for example. If people started en masse pulling away from centralized power distribution and found a way to produce enough juice for their home use or their neighborhood use, that would radically change the game. And there would be immense resistance from the power brokers. But I haven't seen it yet on a scale that would make this kind of difference. Stay tuned. A lot of people are working on this. And in the meantime, what we can do is cut our energy use by a third to start with. If for no other reason, then we no longer want to be enslaved and beholden to these power companies and these oil companies. There are other ways and better ways, and the more we can pare down our own energy use, the more options open up to us in alternative energy fields.
And did you say your website is williamthomasonline.net? Is that
No, it is Will Thomas, WillThomasOnline.net.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you very much. And I apologize, I actually misstated your website earlier. It's WillThomasOnline.net, not William, WillThomasOnline.net. He's got free ebooks there that you need to read, and please donate to Will so he can continue his research. We have our last caller tonight. You're online, caller.
Thank you, Russ. This is Lynn in Maryland. I want to thank both you and Will. Thank you so much. When it comes to the energy thing, and this wasn't one of the things I was going to say, I actually got a postcard about rezoning in our county for properties. And when I started looking, one of the things they address solar energy and solar panels, and you may not use it for more than 20% of your energy needs. There's a frightening thought, isn't it?
Can you explain that? I'm not quite clear. You're not allowed by some kind of law or regulation
to... If it's adopted, the new property rezoning guidelines, and I haven't had time to really look at this because I'm sure that's only the tip of the iceberg.
Where are you located?
It actually says that you may not, one, you can't trim trees and you can't do this. And I'm like, well, you've already blocked the sun for God's sake. Yeah. But it says that you may not use solar energy, you know, what you get from your solar panels, for more than 20% of your total energy needs.
And where is this, please?
I live in Montgomery County, Maryland.
Okay, in Maryland. Oh, my goodness.
I know. It's all the Agenda 21 thing. Yeah. Well, I live in Maryland. I mean, what could get worse? I had a couple things that I wanted to share, and then I have a question, if that's okay, and I'll hurry and just go through them all. First, I was going to let you know, with the wireless, I watched this today, and I didn't thoroughly watch it, but last week on C-SPAN's Communicators, they had Representative Greg Walden on, who's on the House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Subcommittee for Communications and Technology, and he sounded really good. I mean, he actually addresses some of this wireless stuff, and a man named Wheeler has been nominated by Obama to be on the FCC, and Wheeler's a problem. I mean, questionable is an understatement. So it was May 22nd, and it is on C-SPAN's videos. The Communicator's showing it's like 25 minutes, something like that. So you might want to check, folks might want to check that out. And if they don't want Mr. Wheeler, we may want to say something. One of the things, you know, I've come on here a couple times and said, oh, we don't have chemtrails in my area. Well, guess what? Last Thursday, there were, I mean, it was classic grids. Well, and then 2 days of high winds. And I'm actually having some neurological problems. But the weirdest thing, I went out Friday night. It had been really rainy, high winds, bad weather. And I came home, and I had been thinking about this. I had thought I had noticed this, how the sky clears, and it's just odd. So when I got back home, and it was probably about 10 o'clock at night, I sat and I watched the sky start to clear. And you know how normally if a front goes through, it blows out, right? And see the clouds move. And, well, what happened, and I sat there and watched this for 40 minutes, and it happened over and over. It was like you would get a hole in the clouds, and it would clear from the center out. It was the weirdest thing. Just wanted to share that. I observed it. But, and tonight we did have red sky. In fact, I missed part of this because I went outside. One of the other things that's happening in my area is a whole lot of drones and satellites and all sorts of stuff. I went out last night to go to, like, fast food drive-through. It's not 2.5 miles from my house, was only gone 20 minutes. 14 drones in 20 minutes and 2.5 miles. And I'm not seeing things. They're there. What I'm wondering, though, because I hear, and I know Russ has talked about this, you know, because it's one thing to say, look at the chemtrails. It's another to say, do you hear those planes that you can't see because there's all this cloud cover? One of the things I'm wondering is if part of this spraying and everything isn't about masking the sky, like so that you can't see whatever it is that they're doing. So I'm just wondering about that.
Well, I think
and if you had any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Report, the Air Force said the original application, according to the Air Force, of this spraying was aerial obscuration, exactly what you're describing. To deny an enemy, we have to wonder who that might be, the ability to observe U.S. military activity in the skies over their heads. So aerial obscuration, the Air Force's own phrase, was one of the original intentions of this spray program being done by military personnel called weather force specialists. So I don't know what they're masking or hiding, but certainly you won't be able to see this any kind of spray plane above this artificial overcast.
Thank you, caller. I appreciate that. I can also say that I've seen countless times from the very beginning where the sky would be made overcast by the spraying, and they would continue spraying above because I could hear them, and there would be breaks in the clouds, and you could just see the web of trails above the cover that they had created.
Yeah.
So, interesting stuff. Well, yeah, go ahead, Will.
No, that's exactly that. You can see them through the breaks in the cloud cover, but that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, time has really flown. I'm very grateful to have you. I know we haven't even scratched the surface of this subject, but this recording will be online for I don't know how long, for a long, long time, for many people to hear. And I would just like to thank all of you who called in and all of you who have been listening and faithfully spreading the word. As someone who suffers tremendously from this and almost died in 2011 from this, I really do appreciate your efforts. And Will, I appreciate all your research. What I would like to do now, I want to let you go. We've been on for an hour and a half now, and I know you've got a life, you've got a lot to take care of. What would you like to say to people?
One word: guide or alert. You know, get out there, use it. Please keep your wireless devices off until you do so. Turn them off immediately afterwards. But do avail yourselves of this app. I think it truly is a game changer, and it could gather the momentum we need to see some political change.
Excellent. Okay, so Skyder, get it on your mobile device and send those pictures in to your representatives, and let's put an end to the largest crime against humanity in human history. That's what I call it. William, thank you so much for being on with us. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and hopefully maybe we can talk again and hone in on a particular subject and cover some ground there. But I would like to plug your website, willthomasonline.net. Do I have that right, William?
You got it.
willthomasonline.net. He has a number of publications there filled with very unique research and information. Please check them out and show your thanks by donating to Will so he can continue his research and continue freeing up the time, which is difficult to do these days, but to free up the time so he can continue his research and his writing. We will be on next week with Monday Night Live at 8:30 Eastern Time, 5:30 Pacific Time, 12:30 a.m. London Time. Monday nights, please join us. And please don't forget to visit Will's website. And also remember Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, Geoengineering Watch Radio with Dane Wigington, Richard Sachs, and myself, Russ Tanner. 2 hours of in-depth talk and analyzation of geoengineering. So please join us for that. You can reach us at, well, you can go to the Global Skywatch website. Go to globalskywatch.com and look in the top of the left sidebar of the homepage, and there's a link to where you can watch us live. William, thank you for all the work that you do. I really deeply appreciate what you've done, and you made a special mark on my mind because you were the first face and first website that I remember seeing when I first did my search for this subject in November of 2005. So thank you very much.
You're most welcome, and thank you so much for your work. And remember, folks, you know, when we reach out to each other, it's not in fear, it's in love.
Thank you, everyone, and good night.